What is a deed in lieu of foreclosure? Who here has seen anything in the news about this trouble in the commercial real estate space? Okay. All right. We're seeing a lot of gloomy storm clouds on the horizon. A lot of people thought that we'd see more happening in the space, more foreclosures by the banks. I think the banks have been doing everything they possibly can to avoid dealing with this situation, but it's coming. Okay, so what is a deed in lieu of foreclosure? Basically, a deed is the instrument in which a mortgage conveys all interest in a real property to the mortgagee to satisfy a loan that is in default and avoid foreclosure proceedings. The deed in lieu of foreclosure offers several advantages to both the borrower and the lender. So basically, when you hand the keys back to the bank, it's a sale. Even though there's no money transferring hands, one person is giving the deed to another, and that's deemed a sale. Now, of course, what are we allowed to do in commercial real estate when we have a sale? We can either pay the tax when we sell it or do a 1031 exchange. Now, why, if there's no money being transferred, would we want to do a 1031 exchange with a deed in lieu of foreclosure, right? Well, anyone here, anything about debt forgiveness, right? Imagine all that debt forgiveness. What about depreciation recapture? If you've been in the property long enough, there's two major taxes that would be a good reason for somebody to go ahead and do a 1031 exchange. Okay. Commercial properties, candidates, commercial property owners with a low tax basis facing foreclosure. That's basically, hey, I've depreciated my property to zero. I'm about to face an $8 million debt forgiveness foreclosure, but I have a negative $8 million cost basis. To me, 8 plus 8 equals 16, so that's a $16 million tax bill that poor person is facing. I think I'd want to do a 1031 exchange if I had a $16 million tax bill. Anyone want to do 30 to 40% of 16 million? Let's go on to the next slide. Oh, in the news, late mortgage payments pile up from a giant apartment lender. Risk of default is rising for $1.2 trillion of commercial real estate debt. LA Times, the office market exists existential crisis right now. Billionaire Barry joins chorus warning of $1 trillion correction. Okay, Robert.
Can you go back one slide? So you see the bottom line. By the way, my name is Robert Palacios. I'm president of the district. My apology for being late. I was finishing sweeping the parking lot outside. I sweep the floor, count the pigs, collect pen and money. So if you look at that last line, Barry Stern, he just sold an office park in Miramar that he paid $72 million for. They're on the market. I brought him an offer for $70 million, and they lost that. They were holding out for $93 million. This was 18 months ago. 3 months ago, we sold it for $45 million. This is real. This is real. And that $1 trillion correction, there's $1 trillion in commercial real estate debt expiring this year and next year. And we're going to get to the impact of what that's going to be in the
Hold on to that for a second. I'm going to go to the next slide, Robert.
Oh my God, what did I do?
Oh, it's your slide, Robert.
Okay, so take a look at the slide on the right. I'm going to call your attention to Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach. This is the report by TREP, and it points out the percentage of office buildings in the Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach area that are sitting at 1.0 debt service coverage ratio. Debt service coverage ratio is your net income divided by your debt service. 1%, 1.0 or less. So banks want to see 1.2. What does that mean? That you're generating 20% more cash flow than your debt service, which allows you to build a war chest, to do improvements, pay commissions, deal with unanticipated events, things like that. If you're sitting at 1.0 or below, you're not putting any money away. Unless you have a tremendous war chest and you hit one economic bump in the road, you're cooked because you can't pay your debt service. So if you fall below 1.1, banks put you in a special category. Where are the bankers here? Can I see bankers? What's that called? When you where do they put you?
Non-accrual.
Special assets. They're watching you. They want to do cash sweeps and take over managing the property almost. You don't get to touch the cash anymore. That is very dangerous territory. And we're at 30% in the South Florida market area. So with $1 trillion in debt coming due in the next year, and when we go to the next slide, we'll show you what that's been. There's all the debt maturities. Office buildings are yellow, and multifamily is in blue. Right now, there's 35,000 apartments being built in South Florida. This year, they're about to deliver 14 to 15,000 of those. All of those are calling for $3.50 to $4 rents. How many secretaries can afford to pay that kind of rent? $4,000 a month for a 1,000 square foot apartment? It's not happening. Unless people keep coming in from New York and Chicago and California and all these other markets in South America, there's going to be a day of reckoning, right? Can you go to the next slide? This shows the delinquency rate, again reported by TREP. The red line at the top is office buildings. And that is not going in the opposite direction anytime soon. Next slide. Okay, this is, there's a ton of information in here. I want to call your attention to the two columns on the left. So when banks do a loan, they look at all the other metrics, the creditworthiness of your tenants, operating expenses, rents, market trends, and all these other things. But one key metric is called debt yield, which is the net income divided by the debt balance. And banks want to see typically anywhere from 12% and up for a healthy property. If you start falling below 10%, that's very dangerous territory. So if you look at the second column from the left, percentage of current loan amount where refinancing balances will be below current balances. So at a 10% debt yield, 54% of all those properties that are debt expiring, will be unable to refinance for the same amount. And what does that mean? That the ownership is going to have to come up with cash to make up the difference, or sell the property, or do something else. Because the bank's not going to put up the money. If you can't service the debt, it's not going to happen. Now, if they hold out for 12% debt yield, that goes to 67%, 2 out of 3 properties won't qualify. And the third column shows you the dollar amount of debt that's maturing that there will be no financing for if you don't meet this criteria. Okay.
Thank you, Robert. Know your limitations. Okay. All right, so back to the minimize capital gains tax exposure from foreclosures. I touched on that just a little earlier. The property owner may owe a substantial capital gains tax upon foreclosure. In fact, the worst problem about a foreclosure may not be the loss of the property, but the tax owed. It's all about the taxes on foreclosures, indeed, in lieu of foreclosure. Taxable gain is recognized from a foreclosure since the event is deemed a sale by the IRS. So whether it's a deed in lieu of foreclosure or even a foreclosure, both can do a 1031 exchange and defer any of the depreciation, recapture, capital gains, any other taxes, so long as there's a possibility for them to replace the target real estate of the exchange. Okay. This is just kind of really hammering it home again. The lower the tax basis in the property, the greater the gain and the greater the tax. Pretty simple. So, did you know, this is where we break out the big mallet and keep smacking it home, that a deed in lieu of foreclosure qualifies for a 1031 exchange. Now, there's a lot of business opportunity here. You'd be surprised, just because the owner is in a foreclosure or doing a deed in lieu of foreclosure doesn't mean in their other pocket they might have a lot of money. Sometimes they don't, but they still might have a lot of money, and they still might be looking to do an exchange and fund completely from another pocket so that they're able to defer the taxes owed. Who here has met a business owner that likes paying tax? So, minimize capital gains tax exposure from foreclosure. Complete a 1031 exchange where the equity for the replacement property is substantially less than the tax would be. Okay? So, the real question is, if you have to do a 1031 exchange, what does that investor have in terms of funds? And when their CPA and their tax attorney gives them the bad news, here's your tax bill, you now have a potential client who's motivated to look at, here are solutions. Who feels in this room that if you had a client that's facing foreclosure and we're about to just go ahead and let it happen and not do a 1031 exchange, and you let them know that they can defer all the taxes, do you think the client would be appreciative of getting that information? Do you think they would be wanting to work with someone who's provided them with such useful knowledge? Never expect their CPA or their tax attorney to deliver the appropriate information. Sometimes you have professional advisors that do their one function and they won't step out of their box. Sometimes they won't even offer advice unless directly asked. Sometimes they're late to the party. Okay. Okay, minimize capital gains tax exposure from foreclosure. I am going to let everyone kind of read that. We have Paul here from Net Lease Capital. He's one of the sponsors, one of our partners we work with. They provide certain type of product that allows us to provide creative solutions for people facing a foreclosure or a deed in lieu. And now they want to do a 1031 exchange. So what we're trying to do here is get very large properties with creditworthy tenants, put a lot of debt, non-recourse debt, on those properties so that when the investor finds out what their tax amount is, right, can we replace the target real estate for less than the tax bill? So if somebody has, a large number and they don't have, let's say the debt forgiveness is 10 million and they don't have 10 million, well, just how little, what small amount of money, how low can we make that number be to still replace all 10 million? Let's see. Now, of course, in the market of lenders, we have some banks here. Who here is sometimes a friendly lender? Who here is sometimes a neutral lender? And who here is an unfriendly lender? Nobody from the banks wants to admit? Okay. All right. Depending on the investor and what they're dealing with, usually the first two, friendly lender, who's supportive and flexible, neutral lenders who, basically they don't really care one way or another, but they're not fighting anything. It's relatively easy to establish a 1031 exchange account. It's treated just like a normal forward exchange, so long as they open up the exchange account before the transfer of the deed. Okay, so you have to hire the qualified intermediary before the deed transfers from from the person that owns the property back to the lender, the mortgage provider. Okay? So long as that account is opened. Now, for the foreclosure or unfriendly lenders, it's a little more complicated. I am going to say firmly that it can be done. I'm actually working on a case right now where it is a foreclosure, okay? The QI has to set up the account a little different. However, they can still set up an exchange account. And the reason you need to set up the exchange account is you can never take constructive receipt of the monies or the tax consequences of the sale. So if you don't set up the exchange account, even though there's no money, it's just as if you received the check and took constructive receipt of the funds from the sale, even though there are no funds. Robert?
Doc, can you illustrate a little more what an unfriendly lender is, so we know when we bump into one?
Once again, any of the banks want to volunteer here? That's basically where, obviously, the lender is not being cooperative. They're moving ahead with the foreclosure. They're not providing any information. Even with all that happening, the investor is still allowed to open an exchange account. It's a little more expensive. Probably the QI will charge you $5,000 to $7,000. They take on a little more risk there, but it can still be done. For the argument, or for the purpose of this presentation, all you have to know is that, yes, foreclosure, deed in lieu, long as the transfer of the asset has not happened, that investor can open up an exchange account.
Do you see CMBS loans more in the unfriendly than the friendly column, or are you seeing some that are working?
I have to say that we're brought in kind of like as the last yard, and towards the goal line. They're about to trigger tax, and we're coming in with the Hail Mary pass. So I have not seen a pattern. Like I said, they've pushed back a lot of these. Right now, literally in the airport yesterday, flying down here, I got a referral from a qualified intermediary where the person was in a foreclosure. All they wanted to hear from me was the solution. Okay, so I sent off a solution. I'm supposed to have a meeting, but in terms of, we don't interact with the lenders as much. We're just kind of, here's the solution, here's what you're allowed to do. We educate. Here's a recourse deed in lieu. Now, of course, you have different loans out there. You have recourse loans, which you'll see in, I would say, the smaller assets where the individual and or LLC, the entity, has signed for the loan, so the lender can go after their assets. And then sometimes you see non-recourse loans. So in this example, we're showing a recourse example, right? So here we have an original purchase of $5 million. The property value has dropped, just like Robert gave in his example earlier. Fair market value is $3 million. We now have a basis of $1 million. A basis of $1 million. We have a $2 million gain, and we have the cost of debt at $1 million. So we have a tax liability in a recourse deed in lieu of foreclosure, right, of $3 million. At 35%, we've got a tax bill of $1,050,000. Now, suffice to say, you guys, obviously the CPA and the attorney is going to come up with this thing, but the key component here is that in a recourse, the replacement real estate is targeted at the fair market value. So that's what needs to be replaced here, $3 million worth of real estate. Now, going back to the previous slide, we talked about large institutional properties with creditworthy tenants like Amazon, FedEx, regional FBI headquarters. Paul is going to talk about that a little once I am finished up with my presentation. So what we're able to do with the DSTs is have a product with 86% loan to value on the debt, non-recourse, in a product where people can buy a fractional position. So in this scenario, 14% of $3 million is $420,000. So that's the investment that this particular person needs to make. They have to come up with $420,000 to buy a total of $3 million worth of real estate. Okay? So in this scenario, instead of reaching in their pocket and finding $3 million to go out and buy a $3 million property, they only need to give us $420,000 to buy $3 million of real estate. Now, it doesn't matter. Everyone's like, what's the cash flow? There is no cash flow. It's a zero coupon. Why would I want to invest in a zero coupon where there's no cash flow? Well, it's kind of simple here. By doing the 1031 exchange and buying $3 million worth of real estate, they're avoiding paying the IRS over $1 million. And this particular product is a 20-year hold, so what we're hoping to have happen, what generally happens over 20 years in real estate? Right, so we're hoping that over this 20-year hold, the property's going to appreciate, and when they sell the property, we're going to make a recommendation for them to do a 1031 exchange again. And then hopefully at that point, they can roll that money with the appreciation into a cash income producing property. Okay? Sure.
What happens if they say, no, we'd like to take the cash? We want to sell the property for the appreciated value, and we'd like to take the cash.
Thank you for being a patriot. Thank you for funding your government. They're allowed to, but I've never had a client that didn't show up and say, show me how I'm not paying a dime in tax. I mean, that's your 1031 exchange client. Those are the ones that show up and say, I don't want to pay tax. They're, to one level or another, they can be very animated about not paying tax. You're in commercial real estate? Okay, so you've seen those clients that show up and go, okay, we're doing a 1031 exchange, we're not paying tax. The QIs, their entire business of people who are saying, yeah, I'm not paying the tax. So back to what Larry said earlier, sir, defer, 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 die, let your heirs get the step up in call spaces.
So is the purchase then a different purchase from the DST? That you're saying there's no return on that money, on the 420?
Right, it's a zero coupon, so all the rents are going to pay the non-recourse loan that's on the property, okay? Sometimes it can be an amortizing mortgage, but most of the time in this high LTV level, like 86%, it's an interest-only loan, 20 years, coterminous with the 20-year lease on the property.
Okay, so it's a different purchase from the DST share then?
Well, no, that's how they bought the property. So they already set the property up like that. So when you buy in, you're assigned your proportionate share of the debt. So when they buy in for 420, they're assigned 2.58 million of debt. So on the closing statement for 420, it shows they bought $3 million of real estate. Anyone familiar with besides
Non-recourse debt.
non-recourse debt? It's good, right, Trish? So let me go to the next slide. So bottom line, their closing statement shows they purchased for $3 million, and then they're doing their going to fill out their 8824, just like they do with any 1031 exchange, showing that they did a full deferral.
I want to mention, you're all going to get that presentation in the event after today, so you don't need to take pictures of the screen. You'll be getting the presentation.
Now this slide gets my blood going a little better, okay? This is the non-recourse. So we're going to see a lot How many people have seen, I think something just was sold up in Chicago? Well, not sold, but they did a deed in lieu of foreclosure, and they handed the keys back. Seth, do you recall the name of the company up in Chicago?
I don't, but it was about $137 million property where they did a deed in lieu of.
130, what?
Was it Gallup?
I think so. $137 million, they handed the keys back to the bank. Imagine if you were the broker that said, hey, let's do a 1031 exchange. We'll save you $30 to $40 million worth of tax, and you'll only need to put, I think I worked the numbers out, $19 million as an investment in this particular product. They could have deferred all the tax consequences from $137 million. So on a non-recourse loan, the calculation is a little different. Here, they're getting debt forgiveness, interest-only loan mortgage at $10 million. They're getting debt forgiveness for $10 million. So they got a $10 million tax liability at 32%. That's $3.2 million of taxes to the IRS. For $1.4 million into the same type of structural DST that I've been talking about, they're now going to receive $8.6 million of non-recourse debt, their proportionate share, and they're going to buy $10 million position. So once again, I like to say we're going to break out the advanced financial calculator and say, should we pay a $3.2 million tax to the IRS or make an investment of $1.4 million? Now, it's kind of interesting, but going back to what happened at the airport yesterday, this particular client's got a $15 million loan forgiveness, and when I showed the $2.2 million, I think maybe $2.3 million solution, he's like, I want cash flow. Show me something with high LTV. So we have another product with 57%, and he would have to invest $6.4 million, and now I'm scheduled to speak to the CPA and him regarding which one he wants to, look further into. So do not be surprised that when a client is caught up in this, that there's no money there, okay? There just it could be that one building out of 10 that they own.
Scott, I'm trying to see these guru numbers, okay? I see like a guru. When you have this position where a client has to be a liability of $3,200,000 in tax liability to IRS, or invest 1.4, okay, they will put that money, but the 8,600,000, where is that money coming from?
Okay, so when they create a DST, remember I gave the Cantor Fitzgerald
Yes,
example?
yes.
Well, now I'm going to give the net lease example. So they're involved in a lot of built-to-suit properties for Amazon. They're big, fully robotic distribution centers. And so when they acquire the property, let's say it's a $400 million property, they have a lot of pension money, whatnot, that's willing to lend against the strength of the tenant, okay? And so they'll put the debt already, when they purchase it, they're putting 14% down, and the rest is debt, okay? So now they've got the Amazon DST, high loan to value.
It's a loan, that money is a loan. That's
20 20-year interest-only loan, coterminous with the 20-year lease.
I got you.
Okay? Okay, deed in lieu timeline. I've been covering this. Meet with the client, find out whether they have a friendly, neutral, or unfriendly lender. This is to determine what type of exchange account that they need to open with the QI, right? Find out from their advisors what the calculated replacement real estate is based on, is this recourse or non-recourse debt, and what the fair market value is, okay? Here's the best part, hire the QI, okay? So they're gonna hire the QI and open up their exchange account before the transfer of the deed, right? Then, when the transfer of the deed happens, it's just like a regular 1031 exchange. They now have 45 days to identify their replacement property. and 180 days to close. Okay? That's pretty straightforward. Any questions on that? I know that.